I remember the day I saw Egyptian hieroglyphs for the first time. I must have been around 6 years old when I accompanied my mom to work one day. Just next to her office building, there was a tiny antique shop. I loved that shop so much, but I was particularly drawn to one item, which was a serving tray with the Egyptian pyramids and some hieroglyphs drawn on it. It was in a terrible condition and not even for sale. However, I did not care at all, so I kept going there just so I can admire it. I wanted to know what was written on it so badly. Well, almost 30 years later, I haven't changed not even a bit, and I'm still on the quest of unveiling the contents of various ancient Egyptian texts. But what is behind the ancient Egyptian language that makes it so appealing to many scholars and also dilettantes in the past and present? Ancient Egyptian is the original language of Egypt, and it's also the longest continually attested language in the world. The first preserved evidence of Egyptian language are from 3200 BC, and it remained in use until the 11th century AD. Nowadays, the language spoken in Egypt is Arabic, while Egyptian is a dead language, which can only be studied in writing. However, the Coptic language, which is the last stage of development of the Egyptian, is still used in rituals by the Coptic Church. Throughout its long history, the Egyptian language went through changes, which modern scholars classify into 5 stages. Old Egyptian, from around 2600 BC to 2100 BC. Middle Egyptian, from around 2100 BC, and it remained in use as a classical language for the rest of the Egyptian history. Late Egyptian, from around 1600 to 600 BC. Demotic, from 650 BC until 5th century AD. And Coptic, which appears around 1st century AD, and it was used until 11th century AD, when the last texts written by native speakers of Coptic were found. Also, the Egyptian language has 4 types of script. The most popular one is hieroglyphic, used to record text carved into stone, ivory, or statues. It was also used for the text written on the walls of the tombs and the temples, but not exclusively. The cursive form of hieroglyphs is called hieratic, which translates from Greek as priestly. Hieratic is most likely as old as the hieroglyphic writing, and it was used mainly for writing on papyrus, ceramic, leather, wood, or stone shards. You can easily say that hieratic is the handwritten hieroglyphic. Then we have Demotic, which was both script and a grammar, and it developed much later in the Egyptian history. It has nothing to do with demons, but it simply means popular in Greek. The script is even more cursive and abbreviated than hieratic. It was mostly written on papyrus, just like hieratic, and it was predominantly used for administrative texts and personal correspondence. Then we have Coptic, which was adopted by the Christians in the 1st century AD. Coptic uses alphabet, 32 letters in total, from which 24 taken from Greek. Coptic help us reconstruct how ancient Egyptians sounded like. Well, to a degree. This is because, just like Arabic and Hebrew, ancient Egyptian only showed the consonants in writing. Coptic, however, indicates the vowel, and this is how we can reconstruct partially how the Egyptian language sounded. The word hieroglyph comes from Greek and means sacred carving, which is an exact translation of how the Egyptians called their own language, or Medu Necher, the god's speech. Hieroglyphs can be classified as ideograms, phonograms, and determinatives. Let's take one of them as an example. This is the sign for the plan of Egyptian house, and it's also an ideogram, which means idea writing. Nowadays, we use ideograms very often. However, ideograms have a rather limited usage. Therefore, many hieroglyphs also have a phonetical value. They are further called phonograms. Phonograms are sound writing. Just like in English, we have the letters of the alphabet that represent sounds. The same goes for the Egyptian. Many hieroglyphs can be used as phonograms. Here we have peri, which is the verb to go forth, and although it looks like the house that we saw earlier, has nothing to do with houses. In most of the stages of Egyptian language, phonograms were usually written with a sign at the end called determinative. Determinatives usually function as either determining the general idea of the word, or they indicate that the preceding hieroglyphs have a phonetical value. Here we have per Anch, or the house of life. The determinative house indicates that the word is a building. Egyptian hieroglyphs consist of uniliteral or one-letter signs that usually need to be memorized right away by the student of Egyptology. This will enable him or her to use Egyptian dictionaries and also appear cool in the rare case of someone asking to write his or her name in hieroglyphs. You also have biliteral and triliteral signs consisting of respectively 2 or 3 letters. Egyptian language contains around 700 to approximately 3,000 signs during the late periods of Egyptian history. But how was ancient Egyptian deciphered? The last hieroglyphic inscription is dated to around 394 AD, and although Egyptian was still preserved in Coptic, the knowledge of how to read the ancient scripts were lost. There were many attempts to recover this knowledge, but it was only at the end of the 18th century, with the discovery of the famous Rosetta Stone, when the scholars were finally presented with a text written in hieroglyphic, followed by its translation in Demotic and Greek. And indeed, Greek, being the known language, was the key. The decipherment of the Rosetta Stone was not done overnight, but it was due to the work between scholars in several countries, who on the other hand had the approaches and the ideas of those from the past. It was Jean-François Champollion, a young French schoolteacher, who did the final breakthrough and deciphered the Rosetta Stone. Since his discovery, we as Egyptologists continue to refine what we know of ancient Egyptian. Nowadays, when everything becomes digitalized, we're able to use online database, dictionaries, paleographies, image-enhancing programs. We are now able to reconstruct texts that have been considered lost, and this is only the beginning.